Welcome to this Canadian Patriot Podcast, where I am very, very happy to be joined by somebody you may be familiar with, Maxime Bernier, the head of the People's Party of Canada, and somebody who has stood quite principled and consistent over the last years, especially since the whole COVID tyranny was sprung onto the world and which upturned so many lives. There were very few people, especially within the political class, that maintained a consistent moral standpoint. And for that reason, Maxim really jumped onto my radar. So I was really, really happy when he agreed. Here we are, a few days, a week before the upcoming elections, and he agreed to say hello and have a little chat about some of his considerations about Canadians and the world is facing going into the current crisis. And I don't just mean the crisis of a potential Mark Carney administration in Canada, but the crisis more broadly internationally as well. So, Maxime, how are you doing today?
Great, great. Thank you, Matt, for having me. I'm very pleased to be with you. I'm in Montreal today. I will be back on the road tomorrow. Yeah, like you said, we still have a week before the election day, April 28th. But it's going well. I'm very pleased. I'm meeting a lot of people, doing a lot of podcasts, being out there with our ideas. So that's a good time for us.
Yeah, I've noticed that you've been keeping extremely busy on the podcast circuit, more so than any other politician I've ever seen in my life, and I'm amazed, and I find it admirable that you've been able to go from big shows like Tucker Carlson's or Alex Jones to small little things, including my own little podcast here. But I think it also shows a certain degree of not a very very strong degree of passion for the ideas you stand for. So let me ask you this: we have a very short window of opportunity before the elections to intervene. So where do you see your political fight right now? What message are you trying to get across to Canadians who are perhaps on the fence about what they're going to do? Are they going to go for the pragmatic thing of voting Conservative, or how are you approaching your messaging right now?
Yeah, it's all based on our ideas, the People's Party's values, the values that we are fighting for, Western civilization values. And right now, you said in the beginning that we are in a crisis. Yes, not only in Canada, in Europe, in UK, in France, in Germany. And, there's a populist movement, and we are that populist movement here in Canada. And why are we in a crisis in Canada and in the Western world? I believe it is because of the immigrations and mass immigrations and migrations that is happening in Western countries. And that is the most important subject for the future of our country. And my goal is for that electoral campaign to focus on that. But, I was watching the leaders debate. I was supposed to be there, and, they they are doing everything, the leaders debate commission, to exclude us. But anyway, I was watching these debates and nothing in English about immigration. And that's the elephant in the room. Our standard of living is going down for the last 10 years because of mass immigration, the housing crisis because of the mass immigration. And, our healthcare system is not well functional, and have more and more people who are coming in our country, and they will need health care when the time will come. So the mass immigration is having a so huge impact on our society that we must address that. But for Poilievre and Carney, they're okay with mass immigration. We are the only party that is saying we need to have a moratorium on immigration. We need to have a pause on immigration. And the liberals are the ones who created the problem, and the conservative Pierre is pandering to every ethnicities and every special interest groups, and his position on mass immigration is to have 250,000 foreigners every year, plus the international students, plus the temporary foreign workers, plus the refugees. All that together, that will be another 1.5 million foreigners in our country over the last 3 years. So we need to fix that. We need to have that discussion on immigration. And I'm a little bit disappointed because that electoral campaign, it's not about that. And, if we solve that, we will solve a lot of our challenges as a country.
Hmm. I've noticed that one of the big catalyzers underlying global immigration problems tends to have something to do with something that I didn't see addressed at all in the debates, which is the support for a global system which has tended to rely upon NATO expansion, regime change wars, economically crippling nations who desire to develop in order to maintain hegemony. And when you blow up a country or you destroy its ability to have vitality to support itself, you create a situation where people have to leave those countries to go elsewhere, resulting in all sorts of flooding of immigrants into various countries where they would probably rather just have a developed Libya, a developed Syria that wasn't regime changed and that could stand on its own 2 feet. Or in the case of Palestinians, it's horrific to look at what's going on. What's your position on the Canada's support for this type of global U.S. CIA NATO system of forever wars that's been causing, I think, and driving a lot of the immigration problems?
Yeah, we are for peace. We didn't promote the war in Ukraine. We were the only party against that war in Ukraine. And as you know, the Liberals gave $20 billion to Ukraine, and Polyev was okay with that. And right now, the Liberals and the Conservative are ready to give more ammunition and resources to Ukraine when you have President Trump in the US who is trying to have a peace deal with Ukraine and Russia. We are in favor of a peace deal, and it's in line also with the history of our country, with the culture of our country. Peace making, peacekeeping. That's Canada. And it's a little bit bizarre that usually leftist political parties will fight for peace and love. But no, now every party at the federal level, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, the Green, the Conservatives, the Liberal, they are all in favor of wars, the war in Ukraine, giving more money. We are not. And we don't think that Canada must participate in that. And actually, our foreign policy must be based on the security, our national security. And what is happening right now? You said in Middle East, some people are telling me, "Oh, Maxime, the People's Party must be more aggressive. You must take a position in that conflict." And I'm saying, no, I'm not pro-Palestine. I'm not pro-Israel. I'm pro-Canada. And, we don't have any influence in what is happening in the Middle East. That is the US. So, yes, we must be out there and promote peace also. But I don't want our government to participate and sending money or sending ammunitions in the Middle East. It's not our war. So let's concentrate. And actually, we must admit that our Canadian forces are, a very weak organization and woke organization. They don't have the resources to protect ourselves. And so that's why first we must reinvest in our own protection, in our own Canadian forces. But before doing that, we need to fire all these woke generals and putting a new team in charge, in line, that a new team who will promote meritocracy, who will promote people because they are competent. And concerning NATO, you have a point about that. NATO was supposed to be a defense organization. Now it's not that anymore with the war in Ukraine. So I'm questioning our role in NATO. We must have maybe a new relationship with the US on the security part, investing our part to protect our country, working with the US for that. But, and reinvesting, doing what we must have done long time ago, 2% of our GDP in our own defense. We are a sovereign country, but we don't have the means to defend our country. That must change. So reinvest in our Canadian forces, questioning our role in NATO. I'm not for wars. And now NATO is not only a defense organization, but mostly, with what they did in Ukraine. I'm against that. Ukraine must be a neutral country. Ukraine must not be part of NATO. That's very important for us.
Hmm. What about the NATO of the Pacific idea of the Quad and the expansion of NATO facilities around China and obviously Russia is one target of NATO encirclement. China is the other part. What is do you have? Would you say the same sort of position that you would take on the Pacific front too, or do you have a different, more nuanced view there?
No, I will have the same position.
Okay.
NATO, North America defense. The idea of NATO was to defend us in North America. I'm against the expansion of NATO.
Yeah.
We Western countries, we started that, after the Second World War. We started that during the Cold War. And, the expansion of NATO in Eastern European countries. And now, we are pushing Ukraine to be part of NATO. It was not okay when Kennedy in 1962 didn't want to have a NATO base in Cuba, and we had the Cuban crisis because Kennedy didn't want to have any missiles at the doors of the US, and Russia is asking for the same. But for us, we are not respecting what we said, we Western countries, long time ago, and we are pushing Ukraine to be part of NATO. And if Ukraine is part of NATO, we'll have a base over there with missiles at the doors of Russia. It was not good for us, and I can understand why Russia doesn't want that, and we must not do that.
Hmm. Um, the Canadian Arctic has increasingly become a zone for long-range missiles. I know that Justin Trudeau adopted a Arctic Defense Security Update in 2024 in April. Mark Carney, as far as I could tell, endorses that as well, which opens up the door for Canada hosting long-range missiles pointed at both Russia and China. Putin inversely has said, based on the warming up of relations with Trump and the new United States, that everything is on the table for cooperation with the United States and other allies should we wish to embark. He said Arctic cooperation would be a high priority. Space is another one. Would you, number one, just to get you on record, your position on militarizing the Arctic with long-range missiles in preparation for war with Russia? And number two, what would you say if you were in a position to either advise or be the person making the decisions in Canada? What would you say to Putin's offer to develop the Arctic? I know Mark Carney has said absolutely not. Canada will not participate in Arctic cooperation with Russia or the United States. What would you say as a different position?
We'll have a different position. Russia and Putin, is not our enemy. Our own enemy right now is our own government. Look what they did to us during the COVID pandemic. They didn't respect our constitutions. And now you have the federal government that is spending money that we don't have. We have huge deficit. We are paying that with the inflation tax. But no, Russia, we need to have cooperation with Russia. Actually, I must say that Russia did ask a couple of years ago, 2008, 2007, to be part of NATO at that time, or no, sorry, to be part of the G7. And Harper was the conservative prime minister, and he said, no, we don't want Russia to be part of the G7. I think it's a mistake. We need to have good collaboration with Russia, and I will put our resources there. And at the same time, yes, we must protect the north of our country, but I'm not in favor of having missiles over there. It must be to defend our own territory and working with the US. So on that, I'm welcoming what President Trump is doing with Russia, trying to have good relationship with Russia. That must be that. Russia is our neighbors. And actually, like the journalist, mainstream journalist said when the war in Ukraine started, that Russia is the new Hitler, that he will invade Europe. That was not true. What Putin said, he wanted to just be in Ukraine and take these territories and where, you have Ukrainian speaking Russian over there, and they had a referendum to be part of Russia. And these territories were a long time ago under the jurisdictions of Russia. So he never had the intention to conquer Europe. And now, we are almost there for a peace deal. So for me, I will do the opposite of Carney and also Polyev on that.
Mm. There is I'm going to show you a little image here, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this. So a friend of mine, Dimitri Lascaris, brought this to my attention. A survey from here it is. I don't know if you could see that. It's a survey from Leger Marketing, featuring the
Yeah.
current poll readout of where Canadians would likely be voting if the election were to happen tomorrow. Liberal Party comes up at like 43%, Conservatives 38%, NDP 8%. That's a very recent poll. In December, when the same thing was asked when Justin Trudeau was still prime minister, it was a very different configuration where Conservative Party was going to take it. It's like 43%. It was a sweep. Liberals were down to 21%. NDP had like 19. And I'm just curious here. Clearly, Trump's messaging to make Canada the 51st state really inflamed a lot of paranoia in the psyche of Canadians that I think probably not. I probably definitely played a role in them falling for this idea that Carney is going to be the strong, brave, whatever hero figure to keep Canada together in light of this imperial threat. Did Trump screw up badly by saying that? Was he just naive, or how do you think about the that assessment? And is there any other aspect of why the polls have shifted to that extent that we see right now?
Well, sorry.
Mm.
Yes, you're right about, Trump and the impact of President Trump on this election. But also, look at actually what Carney is doing, what Polyev is doing, what Stephen Harper did. What they did also, they wanted to have that election against Trump, not for Canada and speaking for us and
Yeah.
for the future of this country. So that was great for Carney and for Polyev. Don't forget, Stephen Harper wrote a letter in the National Post 3 weekends ago saying that, oh, our sovereignty is in danger. We may be the 51st state. We don't want that. We need to protect our sovereignty. What we must do is impose counter tariffs, dollar for dollar. We know that it will hurt Canadians. And also, we may create a recession for that, but that's okay. So, and also, as you know, Harper is giving advice to Polyev. And so, what they are telling us that, our enemy is Trump, and Trump is serious about 51st state. Trump was never serious about that. That is his way to negotiate. I've read his book, The Art of the Deal. That is clear. He's doing that to discredit his future partners, 51st state, Governor Trudeau. That was not serious. But Carney and Polyev used that to create a fake patriotism, saying that Trump is our enemy and that's serious, that we may be the 51st state, and we don't want that. And the tariff that Trump is imposing, it's dangerous for us. It is not. The tariff that Trump imposed was on American consumers, not on Canadians, American consumers. And we decided, the government of Canada with Polyev and Carney, to impose counter tariffs. It is us Canadians who is paying for that. It's a new tax, 25% on everything that we are importing from the US. So they're telling us they love us so much, Canadians, that they will impose a new tax on us and create a recession for that. Our position must be, and it's because of them and the mainstream media that now there's a panic with the electorate, and they're saying, oh my God, we may lose this country. So now the election, it's about Trump. And Polyev played that game, and shame on him. Because of that, he didn't tell the truth to Canadians about the tariff. He didn't tell the truth about Trump. He tried to have that fake patriotism. And now Canadians are looking at Carney or Polyev. Polyev, a professional politician who never had a real job. He was elected at 24 years old, 20 years in parliament, no experience in the private sector. And for that fake crisis, they're looking at Carney, who was the governor of the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of England, private sector, like a granddad that can reassure Canadians, and they're going for Carney. So Polyev, he has only him to blame for that because he played that game with the mainstream media against Trump.
Yeah. In this case, and I agree. Like they're passing on. I mean, the the punishment that Canadians are getting as far as the increased prices that they can expect, it has everything to do with the choices made to tax consumer goods. I mean, food products, things that normally most Canadians, as citizens, who just need to eke by, make a living, and purchase goods to just survive. That's what's chosen as the thing we're retaliating against. I'm not seeing any evidence that there's like a real intention to use tariffs in a manner that would actually reconstruct or rebuild our factories that we've outsourced over decades. I'm not seeing that. It seems to be of a much lower nature. So let me ask you this: if you were in a position to negotiate with Trump, faced with the idea of making, he got the conversation going. Canada's not using its talents, its resources, its capabilities, so maybe it should become part of the United States. Okay, conversation started. What would you do as far as a counteroffer to create a more reasonable deal that would benefit both Americans and Canadians alike?
Yeah, first, like I said, I won't impose any counter tariffs because that is us who's paying for that, Canadians. And actually, the impact on the American businesses is almost nothing. They are 10 times bigger than us. We are hurting us, Canadians, by doing that. So, first. Second, Trump wants to reopen the free trade agreement that we have with Mexico, US, and us, not waiting until 2026, because that's the date for the renegotiation of that free trade agreement. It must be right now. So I'll do that right now. Second, I will put everything on the table to be sure to have a deal. For example, Trump said, you are imposing me 25% tariff. I will impose you 25% tariff. My tariffs will be reciprocal. But let's do the same. Zero tariff, said to Trump, we won't impose any tariff, a real free trade, and we'll ask him to do that. But also, if we do that, we need to put everything on the table and abolishing the cartel in dairy, poultry, and eggs, because Trump did tweet 3 times on X that he's not happy that we are imposing 300% tariffs on milk, dairy, and eggs coming from the US. It's unfair, and he's right about that. Us Canadian consumers are paying twice the price for these products if you compare that with prices in the US. Let's abolish that cartel for Canadian consumers and to be able to have a trade deal with Trump. But Carney and Poliev, they're not working for Canadians. They're working with the cartel. And they said at the English debate and French debate that they won't put that on the table. By doing that, we won't have a deal with Trump. 100% sure. That is the first condition for Trump to sign a free trade deal with us. So it's very non-responsible by doing that. That is our position. It's based on economic 101, common sense, and being sure that our businesses will be able to have access to the US market. But to help our businesses to be competitive, because as you know, Trump is imposing tariffs and doing that to negotiate new deals with us, with Europe. But his main goal is to repatriate the manufacturing sector in the US. And, I agree with that. He wanted to have, make America great again. And that's part of his policy. I respect that. I want to do the same here in Canada. I want to make Canada great again. So to be sure for our businesses not to go to the US, we need to do a revolution, a taxation revolution. First, flat tax on business at 15%. Why? Because if you add the corporate income tax at the federal level, plus the corporate income tax at the provincial level, our businesses are paying 26.5% income tax. In the OECD countries, in the Western countries, it is 24%. And Trump said that he will lower that more than 24%. So our businesses won't be competitive. We need to have a flat tax, 15% on business, and second, to abolish the capital gains tax. That's the way that our businesses will be able to keep more of their profits. They will be able to reinvest in their productivity. They will be able to compete on the US market and will be able to attract investment here in Canada. That's what we must do. But before doing that, we need to be serious and balance the budget in 1 year by cutting $60 billion to have a surplus, and we can balance our budget in 1 year. And with the surpluses, all that will go to lower taxes to corporations, like I said, and to Canadians, individual taxpayers.
Hmm. Well, I see how you're thinking about it. I know that in 10 years, Justin Trudeau was able to raise our debt from something like 600 billion to 1.2 or 1.3 trillion dollars today in a very short, I mean, that's a blink of the eye to do that. So certainly being able to deal with that and create a bit of a surplus that could facilitate business and entrepreneurs to breathe again, I can get behind that. Question.
But what is disappointing? What is
Yeah.
disappointing, Matt? It's Polyev and Carney are okay with deficit. Actually, Carney is more responsible. He tabled his fiscal plan yesterday or today, and we know that he will have deficit for 4 years. But for Polyev, he is not a fiscal conservative. We don't know how he will pay for the tax reduction that he told us in the beginning of the campaign. That's not responsible. With Polyev, we'll have deficit. And with these deficit, we know that the deficit of today are the taxes of tomorrow or the inflation of tomorrow. We need to know when Polyev will balance the budget. There's still 1 week before the election, and we don't know that. Shame on him. And he wants to be prime minister. That's not responsible.
Mm. Well, on that note as well, Trump's application of the protective tariff system seems to rely upon his study, and I don't know to what degree he's thoroughly studied this, of the McKinley Tariff of 1890. And he cited quite a bit Abraham Lincoln as well as a precedent for this through the American system that he's dropped in his speeches on a number of occasions. You know, the Henry Clay, Frederick List, Lincoln type of model, which did define a long time ago a different approach to political economy, which saw major upshifts in American industrial power. I don't know to what degree he fully understands that, as far as it would apply in the current context, but that's at least the precedent. What's your view of that American system of political economy that Trump's been citing that he's committed to?
Yeah, like I said, Trump wants to repatriate the manufacturing industry because for the last 50 years, the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, the value of the dollar is very high. And so when the US businesses try to export their products are not competitive on other markets. So the problem of the US economy is the US dollar. If he wants to solve that, we must have a new monetary order. He's using tariffs right now just for negotiation and try to have other new deals with his counterparts in other countries. And actually, during his presidential campaign, he said that he wanted to fight inflation. We know that these tariffs are increasing prices in the US. He won't be able to impose these tariffs for too long. He knows that. So to solve that, we will need to have a kind of a monetary reset based on a new monetary order, based on a kind of a gold standard. That would be that, and that would be costly for the US because right now the US are exporting their inflation, they are exporting their dollar, but they are not exporting their goods because they are not competitive. So they are importing goods from other countries. Their dollar is very strong, so it's cheap for them to buy goods coming from other countries, but it's expensive for other countries to buy American goods. The fundamental of that is the dollar as the world reserve currency. When you have that, central banks need to buy dollars for international negotiation and international transactions. So not everything, but almost everything is in US dollar. So the demand for the US dollar is high, and they need that because of the status of the dollar. So the real solution will be to have a new monetary order. And I'm listening what people around Trump are saying, and that may happen, but that will be costly for Americans because now, they will have to work, they will have to export, and now they're living beyond their means because the dollar is the world reserve currency. The inflation will come back to the US, they will have a recession. The next couple of years would be very tough. And same thing for us in Canada.
Hmm. Yeah, I noticed that you brought that up even on Tucker Carlson. I was surprised to hear those remarks, and I believe that that's true as well. In the sense that I also am also of the view that the current system has been stretched beyond its limit, and a new system has to be created. Maybe you can go into a bit more detail. I'm hearing a lot of discussion about, a Bretton Woods 2.0 or some form of, in the original Bretton Woods in 1944, that was whatever, 65, 66 countries, I'm not too sure, who came together around the idea that we need a new financial architecture after the war. Within 2 weeks, something was hammered out with flaws, but at least it was viable. That was what, 75 years ago. That's you know come to it's been dismantled. Something very different has run amok, outsourced a lot of our heavy industry, our ability to have full spectrum economies. That's long gone. So now we've got a bubble economy that's based on gambling as more of a normatized form of behavior of creating value, or just stealing wealth from other countries through extraction, or seeing Africa like our plantation. But the idea of developing, thinking about production, that's we've forgotten how to do that. So I do think a new type of system does have to be brought online. Number one, do you think the Trump people are thinking on those terms and are preparing to remove the dollar from the reserve status and set up a new financial architecture? And number two, what do you think what that type of conference or that type of system should look like? Should it be a new Bretton Woods, or should it be something totally different?
Yeah, I think they're aware of that. They won't say that publicly because it is not a good news for American consumers. But you look at the price of gold the last month; it's going up and up and up, and more gold are coming to the U.S. right now. And actually, also, it's I believe that something will happen, like you just said. I believe that it will be a kind of a system like we had in the 19th centuries. We had a kind of a gold standard at that time. We had deflation, so prices were going down, the purchasing power was going up, our standard of living was going up at the same time. So something like that will happen. What will help President Trump is the BRICS countries. They want to de-dollarize, and they're doing that right now. That's helping. And look what China is doing right now. I think they're selling their treasuries. So something is happening in the market. And I don't know if the U.S. administration will be able to manage that and try to do their best for the transition. But the transition would be costly, not only for the Americans, but for us. And we don't have our central bank. The Canadian central bank does not have any gold reserve. We are the exception. So if we have a new system based on gold, it will be very difficult for us. So that's why, I'm looking at all that. Something will happen. Now we have, debts and deficit, not only in the US, in Canada, in the US, in Europe. It's not sustainable. And that's why, it is inevitable. It will come in a year, in 5 years, in 2 years. I don't know. But, I know that a lot of people right now, they want to be ready and they're buying gold. And I think it's only the beginning.
Hmm. I find myself speaking a lot to Canadian patriots in Alberta who are increasingly part of the sovereignty movement. There's factions within, either some that wish to break free and join the United States since they don't trust Carney, and it doesn't look like Carney's promises to allow for or encourage natural resource development is all that genuine. I think his commitment to degrowth is ultimately his religion, though he might maneuver and say something different for the short term. But so I'm seeing part of that movement is calling for joining the United States. Part of it is saying we need to have our own republic or join the Commonwealth as an independent Commonwealth. There's different flavors, but ultimately the same thing. Now, what is your view on Alberta independence?
I'm happy that they're I'm happy that they're having these discussions. And I know why. The federal government, the conservatives and the liberals are not respecting our constitution. And that's why in our constitution, you have a radical decentralization in Ottawa. And if you respect the constitution, provinces will have more autonomy. Now they're mad. They're mad because they cannot develop their own natural resources. There's the Paris Accord, but Poilievre won't solve that. He will still be part of the Paris Accord. He will still give subsidies to the green industry. And also the most important for them is the equalization formula. The fact that Alberta is giving money to Eastern Province and that formula is unfair. Poilievre is not speaking about that. So what you said with a liberal government, the independentist or separatist sentiment in Alberta may rise, but also with Poilievre. Poilievre is not answering the needs of people in Alberta. So I don't understand where they're always voting for the conservative and they're not voting for them. Poilievre is working for Toronto and Vancouver to win, to be in government. He will need to have the seats near Toronto. There's more seats there than in all Alberta, and he's going to the left. And that's why Albertans are mad. This election is always decided in Quebec and Ontario, and they're fed up with that. We are the only hope for this country. We can save this country. But I would understand, and my advice to them will be serious about that. If you want to be independent, vote for an independentist party, a separatist party at the provincial level, have a referendum on that. That will be the only way for the conservatives and the liberals to take you seriously, and maybe we'll have a negotiation to keep you in the Confederation. That's my advice to you. And if you have a referendum, I'll be the only and the first federalist believing in this country that will go in Alberta and tell you, vote yes. That's the only way for you to have a change in this confederation. And actually, Preston Manning said the same thing. Preston Manning said, I tried to change with the Reform Party. The Reform Party merged with the Conservative Party, and they're going to the left and to please Ontario and Quebec. And so I believe in this country. I want this country to be like that. But if our platform is not adopted, they want to have their own pension plan. They must be able to have that. They want to have their own police force. They must be able to have that. They must be able to also control their immigration. They must be able also to not having any regulations to fight climate change. So I understand their point, but saying that, you have also in Quebec, in my own province, the PQ in Quebec right now is ahead in the poll with a young, charismatic leader, and he's telling to Quebecers, if you vote for the PQ, the next provincial election in Quebec will be in 2026. If you vote for the PQ, it's a vote for the separation. I will do a referendum on the separation the year after being elected. What I'm telling you, we may have a referendum on the independence for Quebec in 2027. And I don't believe at that time that Canadians will come to Montreal and say, I love you, stay in this country. I don't believe that. So we have that debate right now because of mass immigration. Quebec wants to control their immigration, and they want to be sure that the francophone, the French language would be protected. And now you have all these foreigners that are coming to Canada. They don't speak English or French. So Trudeau is creating that. And Trudeau, Carney and Poilievre are creating the separatist movement out west because they don't listen to Western Canadians. And I hope at this election that more people in Alberta and Western Canada will vote for the PPC, because that's a nice message to send to Poilievre and all these establishment globalist leaders. Enough is enough. We must respect our constitution. If not, we are leaving.
I think that those are pretty good parting words, honestly, Maxime. I had a couple of other questions, but I found in your exposition just now, you sort of addressed that enough adequately, in my mind, such that I think that does. I know for myself, I am endorsing the People's Party this year, and the reason principally for that is that the best Canadians that I know, the best patriots who have been consistent moral citizens, are members of and are running under that banner that you have led. And I would like very much despite the fact that people will tell me, and they often do, saying, why are you splitting the vote? Just be pragmatic, be practical, go conservative. I'm like, well, look, at the end of the day, the conservatives, under especially Poilievre, have completely failed. Harper was no better at maintaining any consistency or sense of really caring about the national interest of Canada. And I would like to see, at the very least, for starters, some members of parliament from the People's Party. I mean, I know a number of people who would do a fine job if they were given the chance to take seats in the parliament and be the conscience, be the gadflies, and speak the truth to power that otherwise is not being spoken because everyone's just going along to get along and moving like lemmings towards the cliff. So I'd really like that type of disruptive, healthy, disruptive set of views to break through the wall in Ottawa. So I do appreciate what you've done to rally the forces in that sense. And I don't know if you have any parting thoughts either to speak towards people who are maybe on the fence 7 days to go before the elections, and they're like, I like you guys, I like what you stand for, Maxime, but at the end of the day, I really want my team to win. I don't want the Liberals in. What do you say?
I'm saying there's no such thing as splitting the vote. It's your vote. Nobody owns your vote. You own your own vote, and we must win your vote. And with our ideas, if you like our ideas, I hope you'll support the People's Party and our candidates across the country, because we are serious. What I'm saying today at this election, I'm not saying that to please you and to have your vote for this election. And I said that in 2019. I said that in 2021. We are doing politics differently based on convictions and ideas. And that's always the same platform, because we strongly believe that we can save this country. So come with us and we'll be more influential and our ideas will win. That being said, we may have, yes, our first and more candidates elected at this election and be in parliament. In Alberta, for example, we had an average 10% of support in the province of Alberta at the last general election, and our average nationally was 5%. So we have great candidates in Alberta. And in Alberta, you don't split the vote. No Liberals will be elected. And our people, when they will be elected, we will support Poilievre. Yes, we will support him when he'll be a real conservative, when he will tackle the equalization formula, when he will withdraw from the Paris Accord, when he will balance the budget. We will support Poilievre and push him in the right direction. And, like that, we can be your insurance policy that the conservatives are conservative. So vote in line with your conscience, and we'll see. We will be there and we will start that revolution. And, it's the only way to have changes in this country is to vote for what we want.
Thank you, Maxime Bernier. All right, and I hope everybody follows their conscience going into the elections, as Maxime has advised. And I look forward to future conversations. Good luck going forward, and thank you for your time. Take care.
I want to thank you, Matt, for that, but I want to say also to your viewers, go and vote. That's important. There's 40% of the population who didn't vote at the last election. So look at the programs of all these politicians and go and vote. That's very important. I want the participation rate at these elections to be not 60%, but 100%. That would be great. So, but thank you, Matt, for giving me that
it's true. No, that's so important, just to emphasize that, like, the people who have become so demoralized that they just simply stay at home can be the margin of difference that really makes or breaks a nation. And really just looking in the mirror and seeing that even though the world looks like a corrupt basket case, a circus show, despite that, there are people putting their minds, their conscience, their bodies into the fight, and your choice to leave the house, to put your ballot, your vote in, could really change the nature of the game in all sorts of nonlinear ways. So people need to just take that into themselves. Like you said, it's been 60%, barely 60% of people actually turning out. If we just jack that up a few more, 10%, ideally 100, but even still, 70, 80%. That extra 20 could be the margin of difference. So good point. Wonderful. I endorse that. Thank you. And thank you for your time. Take care.
Thank you, Matt. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.